would you say that that's something that you could change? Not only, you mentioned Alabama football, but let's say it is the New York Knicks or it's baseball. Could you change the in-game statistics to be, if you're an offensive player, running back, hey, tackles missed, and then conversely, linebacker, tackles made, tackles not missed? Like, how granular can you get with the in-game stuff and compare it to the weight room stuff? And then how does it all get overlaid for any of our coaches that are listening and like, this sounds really cool?
So if you don't look at it, you don't know. And I'll bet a lot of people don't look at it.
They don't look at what, like the in-game statistics?
The actual in-game statistics, yeah. And
How
actually,
deep of the statistics are you talking?
I mean, you can go as granular as you want to go because the information is there.
Yeah.
The interpretation of it is a different conversation. But the other thing is to talk to a coach, right? So if I'm a lineman coach and you're the strength coach and you talk to me about player A, player B, player C, player D, I'd literally get off the bat and tell you, right, he needs this, he needs that, he needs that, he needs this. And then you implement what you do and then come back to the coach in 6 weeks' time or et cetera and say, let's have that conversation again. Is this guy improving this or improving that? No, he's not doing that. Okay, go back to your drawing board, implement whatever you're doing. But if he turns around and says to you, well, actually, so-and-so, I've noticed that he's actually improving his speed. He's improving his speed laterally. He's able to grip more and block more. And he's definitely improving the job, because this is now a combination between what the coach does on the field to coach and what you do in the weight room to strengthen. But there's a yin and yang of this. There's a collaboration of this. Remember, right? We're all on the same page. And that's the other thing that sometimes it bewilders me is like, I've had situations where strength coaches don't want to share data with athletic trainers. Athletic trainers don't want to share data with strength coaches. I've got situations where, this is true, I've got situations with professional teams where the front office, right, don't want to share the game stats with the clubhouse, the performance staff. They're like, oh no, this is to do with us. I'm like, well, you're all on the same team. You're all trying to achieve the same thing. And it's a W, and it's a ring. That's what everyone wants to do. Mm-hmm. So why are you staying in your silo and not giving me that information that I think actually might give me a 1% change in what I do? And I can give you something on my end that might give you a 1% change on what you do. But that 1% could be the difference between winning and losing. That 1% could be the difference between a player being available for one game that could change the course of what happens for the team. And those margins are so small, right? They're so small that you've got to look at all those tiny margins collectively, and you will find that you will actually improve performances of teams, performances of individuals. And that's the bit where it still bewilders me, working for someone supporting some teams and organizations, that I still see all that going on.
Is it something I agree with you, and like one of the things that I did was I got rid of the old record board when I got to Towson, because I didn't want people trying to chase numbers in the weight room. I cared about, I told them, I said, the record that matters is wins and losses, and then the other number that I care about is, we tracked player availability. That was number one. And then number two was, if you did get hurt, what was your average time to return? That was statistic number two that mattered.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. But don't get me wrong, I think showing progression of any level.
Yes, still track all the stuff that they did. It's like, to me, it was 100%. Their report card.
Yeah, and listen, a lot of people now are using data to test that, whether it's Perch or Vowed or Kangatech or 1080 Motion or GymAware or whatever. They're using these technology now to collect information to show improvement, which I think is great. But what's even greater is actually looking at your availability stats. And then what's even greater than that is looking at what a coach is telling you about an athlete and what the data tells you about an athlete in the sport that they choose to play, and how can you implement something in what you do on a daily basis with those athletes to affect those stats, not the fact that they can accelerate a bar 10%, or they can bench 20% more, or squat another 50 pounds, right? It's all athlete development. But what's really important is, how does that, what you do in the weight room, relate to what they do in their sport? And there's a massive crossover at the end of the day, right? Improving someone's robustness, improving someone's speed, improving someone's deceleration. All of these things can have an effect by you lifting more. Mental, we talked about, grit, affecting the Superman scenario, that they come out and they feel like they're, invincible. But there's still that element that every athlete can improve what they do technically, tactically on a field, that you perhaps could have an effect in the weight room. And that's the thing, I think, that's the message of sort of doing this for 30 years and working in multiple professional sports, that I personally feel is missing.
Do you think
I
that
think
their problem is too much technology in sport? Because that's something we talked a lot with our guests lately about, is the overindulgence in all of those different technologies that you just talked about.
so. Like, what we try and do is we try and bring all of those together, because people don't have time. And time is a huge issue. So all this stuff that we're talking about today, right, is you've got to have some time to implement this. And probably the easy excuse is to say, well, I don't have enough time. And, my view is, well, you can make time, especially when it's looking at program design and things that we're talking about in the off season here. But during the day-to-day workings, like, I spent 7 years on a bench in the NBA and traveling and doing back-to-backs and getting in at 3 a.m. Like, it's a tough schedule. So time is a problem. What we try and do is we try and bring all that data together so that we give you one page to look at what you particularly want to look at. My issue is that technology is all in different silos. So you use one hardware and you've got a software looking at the data. You use another hardware, you've got to use their software to look at the data. And really what you should do is you should be able to press the button and see on your phone a report that's specific to what questions you want to answer. And that's where I've sort of now left my practitioner life and moved into sort of this software. But I agree. I think that we're sort of overanalyzing the information that we're given, but we don't quite know what to do with it. And I think really where we should be looking at is actually the game, the information from the coach, even if it's subjective data. How do we get that information from the coach to relay that into what we're doing from an objective perspective, looking at testing or progression or regression of an athlete? And I think that we're getting too much in the weeds with a lot of data, because now there's a lot of data. Like, how many data points do you look at on a GPS unit? How relevant is that on the GPS to performance and to our injury availability? And you'll have people that will come and go, well, you'd have the purists that will go, well, we follow this regime and, here's our injury stats, and our injury stats have gone down. But, if you're looking at that longitudinally, then my view is it's not all about just that one piece of information that you're looking at. Like I said, every athlete is a cake, right? And every athlete's makeup of the cake, different types of cake, different positions, different psychologies, different mentalities, different attitudes, different genetics. Every athlete is different. And therefore, if you look at each of those cakes and the slices of those cakes and the makeup and the quantity of the slices of those cakes, that for me is how you get down to the granular level and what you should be doing to use this information and data to enhance what you do. And I don't see that. And that's the bit where our sort of customization, and we use like products like Power BI and Tableau, which I'm sure a lot of your sort of sports science people will use. which are very beneficial. So we have that built within our ecosystem, because then we can be very specific and customize each individual report. So each athlete will get their own cake. And that's the way that I personally think it should be done, rather than sort of this generic, we're just looking at our GPS data, or we're just looking at our perch data. It's like, yeah, great. I keep going back, the questions I ask all the time, and even running this software company, so what? So what? Great, you're doing this, so what? Well, we do this, and you're running at 22 miles. I had a wide receiver that I've looked after for years, right? For years in the NFL, very famous wide receiver. He said to me 2 weeks ago, he says, I've been running at 22 miles an hour, which is pretty fast, okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
And he's a freak of an athlete. And I went, great. But my view is, so what? Great, you're getting up to 22. Absolutely fantastic. You can get away from someone. Great. But are you actually getting away from someone and basically catching the ball? Are you improving your yardage? Are you doing the things that you used to do 4 or 5 years ago before you had an injury? That for me is more relevant than running, whether he's running at 21 or 20 or 19. So what? Can he leave his man? How fast is his acceleration and his deceleration? Here's the data. Great. But so what? Can he actually make the play? Can he catch the ball? Can he make the yardage? And that's the data I'd be looking at first. And then I'd overlap that in my cake with he's running at this, or he's accelerating at this, etc. And then I take those two pieces of information, and then I put a program into place for his availability, and likewise improving, let's say, his power in the weight room. And then I'll come back to that in 3 months later, and then I'll go, all right, so now he's running at 22 miles an hour, but actually that 22 miles an hour is now improving his availability, his ability to make more yardage and catch more balls. And then you're now looking at several slices of the cake, and you can now put that into a one-pager to look at all that information. Does that make sense? I'll try to keep that really, it's a lot more complicated than that, but I'm trying to sort of give the idea about these cakes and these segments of the cakes, and it's not black and white, and there's many different segments of a cake that makes up each individual athlete, and some have more slices or different types of cakes. Is probably the best way to describe it or think about it.
That makes perfect sense to me. I could talk with you about this stuff all day. We've gone for over an hour, and I know you're traveling out there. So, to anybody that's stuck with us this long, and they're interested in the Apollo, where can they learn more about it, and where can they be directed to?
Yeah, so I'm not really big on social media. I'm more on LinkedIn, so they could look me up on LinkedIn. Or they can get in contact with me through info@ApolloV2.com, which is our website, ApolloV2.com. They can contact and get hold of me through there. And if people are interested in sort of the things that we're doing as a company, but my philosophy and what we're talking about today is sort of the imprint that I'm trying to put into our sort of software business. And the bottom line is, how can we help organizations and teams? Because at the end of the day, again, each team and organization do things differently. And time, for me, is one of the biggest things I think that we can help with regard coaches. I'll give you an example. So collecting information from coaches is really difficult, right? And people don't like doing it. And let's be really honest, right? Coaches just hate. They're coaches, right? They ain't going to go in and get on their computer and type up what they did today. Forget it. It's not going to happen. So in our app, we designed voice to text. So if I'm coaching you today, I can press a button and talk in my phone, and all your notes go into your report on your slices of your cake in your report.
Nice.
So now I'm collecting information on you, because if I said to you, all right, what did you think of athlete A 6 weeks ago? You wouldn't have a fucking clue. Sorry, I don't swear. You wouldn't have a clue. You wouldn't have a clue, right? You would not have a clue what happened 6 weeks ago. Forget about it, right? We wouldn't. And the same for the trainer, and the same for the coach on the field.
Yes, yes.
Right? Opinions will change. But if you have a way to collect just that piece of data from, say, the pitching coach in the pen, right? And literally relay that to the strength and conditioning coach. And then you're overlapping what the strength and conditioning coach is saying. By pressing a button and talking in your phone, now you're sharing information.
That's dope. We're gonna have the links below for you guys if you're curious to go to their information, so you'll be able to check it out down below. But Dave, I appreciate being able to learn from you, man. This has been an absolute pleasure. So thank you again for coming on.
Justin, I really appreciate chewing the fat with you, sir. And I wish you all the very best, and thanks for having me on board.